Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at a little bit of Latin grammar and specifically look at personal pronouns for first and second person. So here's the question we want to ask to start. What is a pronoun? And in their simplest form, pronouns replace nouns, right? So if you had a sentence like I am happy or you are sad, I and you are both pronouns. Okay. So like I just said, they're replacing nouns. It's pretty simple and straightforward. So the idea here is that you're avoiding repetition. So if I were to say, I see the boy is happy, I'm repeating the word boy twice, right? You want to find a more concise way to say that. And that's where pronouns come into play, right? They replace the repeated word. So in other words, instead of saying, I see the boy is happy, I could say, I see the boy, he is happy. Right? So I've gotten rid of that repetitive phrase. Okay. So what do we mean by personal pronouns, right? I started the video saying that we're talking about pronouns and personal pronouns. What does it mean, personal? And it's pretty straightforward, right? The person of a pronoun is just a grammar term. So in Latin and in English, we use the terms first, second, and third person to refer to a lot of different things. We use it for verbs, but we also use it for pronouns. Okay. And the same idea applies for all of these things. First person is when you're talking about the speaker themselves. So in English, it's the word I and we, right? If it's singular, I would say I. If I am part of a group, right? If I, the speaker, am part of a group, I say we. That's it. Singular and plural. I and we are first person pronouns. Second person refers to speaking to someone, right? The person, or I guess thing, you could talk to an object if you want, that the speaker is talking to, right? So in English, you use the words you and you all. When you're talking to someone, you have to say, how are you doing? Or how are you all doing? And the difference between you and you all is the difference between singular and plural, right? Singular would be you, plural would be you all. So am I talking to one person or more than one person? That's all it is. Now, third person is referring to the person or object being spoken about, right? So that would be if I was having a conversation with someone and I say, hey, how are you doing, right? There's me, the speaker, and you, the person that I'm talking to. I might say something like, hey, I haven't seen, Jimmy in a while. How is he doing? When I say he, that person is not necessarily there, right? I'm referring about someone who's not in the conversation, referring to someone not in the conversation, I should say, okay? That's what we mean by third person. So in English, you use the words he, she, it, or they, depending on how many people or objects the speaker is talking about, right? So again, singular versus plural. Okay, but we want to pause for a second here because you might have noticed at the beginning of the video, I did not mention third person pronouns, right? We're not going to deal with them in this video because they have gender, grammatical gender, which makes them trickier to figure out in Latin. So what I mean by that is there's a difference between saying he, she, and it, right? And in Latin, it has to do with that grammatical gender. It gets a little complicated. We'll put it in a different video just so you can see it differently. A lot of textbooks put them together, but for now, let's just split it into a different video. Okay, so now that we understand kind of what they are, how do we use them, right? That's the real question. What are we doing with these pronouns? Well, a key word you want to understand is antecedent, okay? So like we said earlier, pronouns are often used to avoid that repetition. The word that's being replaced by a pronoun is called the antecedent, literally the thing that went before it in Latin. Okay, so whatever word I'm referring to and replacing with a pronoun is called the antecedent. Okay, so let's look at a few examples. If I said, I see the dog, right? That's a first person singular pronoun, right? I and the pronoun. If I said Cornelius and I are walking to Rome, we see the dog would be how I could make it into a pronoun, right? The we is replacing I and Cornelius, or Cornelius and I. So that's why it's first person, because the speaker is part of it and there's more than one person. That's we, right? What it would look like in English. You could say, Cornelius, do you see the dog? I'm talking to Cornelius. There's only one Cornelius. Do you see the dog? It's a second person singular pronoun. And lastly, I could say Cornelius and Gaius, do you all or do you both see the dog? Okay, that you all here is second person plural because I'm talking to more than one person. So that's how we kind of use them in English, and we'll dive into the Latin, right? But even here, you can see that the pronoun is replacing something. So you all, in this example, is replacing Cornelius and Gaius. Cornelius and Gaius would be my antecedent, the thing that I'm replacing, okay? So hopefully that makes some sense and we're not too confused so far. But now we want to move forward and think, what do they look like in Latin, right? We got the English down, but how does this all work in Latin, okay? So in Latin, pronouns have case and number, okay? Depending on how you use them. At least first and second person pronouns have case and number. Like we said, first and second person pronouns do not have gender though, right? If I say to you, I am happy, you have no idea the gender of I. right? It's not obvious. Same thing with we, you, or you all. There's no gender attached. Now, I will say for third person pronouns, there is gender attached, but like I said, we're dealing with just first and second for now. Okay, so case and number is what we're looking at here. Okay, and that might make you a little confused and frustrated. Like, what do we mean? Gender, no gender, what's going on? Don't worry about it, all right? Take a deep breath. We're going to figure it out. And the chart will be the easiest way for you to see this. Not that you need to straight up memorize it, but I would say at least being able to refer back to this chart will help you understand pronouns because they get very easy once you get the hang of it. Okay, so the pronouns function like this. We have first person and second person, singular and plural in this chart. Okay. And they have cases, right? So how they're being used is what the case is here, right? And there's different cases in Latin, of course, so the pronouns have different cases. So first person singular, I, goes ego, me, mihi, me. All of those mean either I or me. And the difference in translation has to do with the case. So genitive is of me, dative is to or for me, accusative would be the direct object, ablative is often by, with, from, and on me, and down the line. Okay, so that's the singular first person. Plural first person is nos, nostri, nobis, nos, nobis, right? We. On the second person side, you have tu, tui, tibi, te. And on the plural, you have vos, vestri, vobis, vos, vobis. Now, you'll notice that they look kind of similar, right? They're not exactly the same, but nos and vos are pretty similar. You're just replacing an N with a V. And even ego and tu, right? There's similarities in te and me, right? That's a pretty close one. So once you get the hang of it, you can figure this out pretty easily. And the general idea is that the first person singular will start with an M, right? Obviously, ego is an exception, but the rest of them are starting with M. The first person plural will start with N, right? The second person singular starts with a T, and the second person plural starts with a V. So these are little tricks that'll help you understand what's going on in this chart and be able to recognize them, okay? So we have a chart. Great. What do we do with it? What am I supposed to do? Which one am I supposed to pick? Okay, so when it comes time to use a Latin pronoun or translate it, whatever you're doing, the first thing you want to do, find the antecedent. What word are you replacing? Okay, so look at the word you're replacing. Then you determine the person and number of your pronoun based on the antecedent. So if I say you, right, and you is referring back to, or sorry, if I were to say he, rather, and he is referring back to, a male, right, in third person, you'd say, oh, it's a masculine pronoun. For first and second, you don't need to worry about gender here. So you're really thinking about singular and plural, right? What person and what number. So if I use the pronoun you, and I'm talking about one person, that's singular, right? So I already have a good idea of where it is in the chart. The person is depending on, am I saying I, we, you, or you all? Okay, so the antecedent will help you understand that. Who am I talking about? What am I replacing? That'll give you the person and the number. The case is determined by what your pronoun is doing in its own sentence, right? What's its function? So that doesn't necessarily jive up with the antecedent. So you have to look and say, okay, I know I'm using a first person singular pronoun. What is my pronoun doing in the sentence? Oh, it's the subject. I'm going to use ego, right? That's kind of how you unpack all this. So just take a look at an example because I think it's easier to see when you're looking at actual sentences, right? If you had Gaius and I are walking, right, and then your second sentence was we are happy. What's the antecedent of we? What word, or in this case words, is we replacing? It's Gaius and I. That's the antecedent. Okay, because it's me, I, and there's more than one person here. It's first person plural. That's what my pronoun is, we. Okay, and in its own sentence, we is acting as the subject. We are happy. So I would go to my chart, I would look at first person plural, and I would choose the nominative case. It would be nos, right? If I were to write this in Latin, I would have nos. So here it is, right? We are happy would become nos laeti sumus, right? We are happy, nos is my pronoun. Okay, so hopefully that makes some sense and you're following along so far. We're going to do some more examples, but so far, hopefully your brain isn't in a pretzel. It does get easy once you start using these. So let's dive in and do some examples and look at it in Latin and try to figure out how this all works. Now, the examples I'm going to give you are coming from the Road to Latin textbook, which just happens to be the one that I use, but you can find examples of pronouns all over the place, right? We use them all the time in Latin. And in English too. So here's our first sentence. We have heri, sexti, ego te laudavi quod tu fabulum pulchrum de Roma scripseras. Okay, so yesterday, heri, right, yesterday. Sextus, I'm talking to Sextus. You have a vocative there, that's important. So yesterday, Sextus, ego laudavi, I praised Te means you. So I'm saying I praised you, right? So if you look at this, ego is my first person singular pronoun, right? I. And because I'm saying I praised, right? I is the subject. I chose ego. It's the first person singular nominative pronoun. Okay. Te is the direct object here. I praised you, right? It's the person being praised. Now, you is singular because I'm talking about Sextus. He's by himself. So I'm in the second person singular column. You look up what is the accusative, right, form of that pronoun. It's going to be te. I praised you. Ego te laudavi, right? That's a good example of our pronouns. And I praised you because you, too, scripseras, right? You had written. You here is the subject of the second part of the sentence. Quote is a conjunction, so you really have two separate sentences here. So what is to doing? To is the subject of scripseras, right? So you is the subject. That's why it's there. And because I'm still talking about Sextus, one person, I'm going second person singular, nominative, it's going to be two, right? So the last part is you had written a beautiful story, a fabulam pulchrum de Roma, about Rome, rather, right? So you have three pronouns here, and they're all doing different things, right? Ego, te, and tu. Here's another example. If you saw itaque hodie premium tibi a me dator. So you're saying, and so, right, today, hodie, a reward, a premium, that's my subject, dator is given, right? It's a passive voice verb, right? So a reward is given, tibi. Okay. Now, tibi means to you. If you were to look it up on your chart, it's second person singular and it's dative because you give something to someone, right? So a reward is given to you by me, a me. That's ablative because you're using the ablative of agent here in a passive voice sentence. So you're saying it's given to you, tibi, by me, a me, right? The me is first person singular, ablative case. Okay. Here in the next one, you have vos nobis fabulam de Aenea et principis Romae naravistes. So vos, you all, right, is a second person plural pronoun. So it's something about you all or y'all or whatever you say, right? So you all, naravistes, you all told. It's the subject. That's why it's vos. Vos is a second person plural nominative case pronoun, right? So you all told a story, nobis, to us. This is going to be dative plural because it's nobis, us, right? And it's because you're telling something, a story, to someone. It's going to be dative case, right? So you're saying you all told a story to us, nobis, about Aeneas and the beginnings of Rome, right? Aenea et principis Romae. Now we have this one, and this is the last example we're going to do. We have fortasse pars fabularum nobis a vobis narrabitor, rather. So this one seems like it would be a little confusing because you have nobis and vobis, and they look kind of similar, but just take it one bit at a time. You're saying perhaps part of the stories, right, will be told. So pars is my subject, narrabitor is my verb. It will be told. So I already have a subject. I don't need another one. So what is nobis doing here? Well, again, you tell something to someone, right? So you're saying part of the story will be told to us, nobis, right? It's going to be dative here. A vobis means by you all. The a vobis is ablative, second person ablative plural, or second person plural ablative, you might say. Okay? So again, this is another good example of seeing how these pronouns work and how you can translate whenever you see Latin, right? All you're doing is looking at the chart and trying to figure out where is this on the chart? What am I looking at? It gets a lot easier as you go. Okay? But at the end of the day, all these pronouns are doing are avoiding repetition, right? So instead of saying if you took this example, instead of saying part of the story will be told to me and Johnny, right? Me and Johnny became we. And instead of saying it will be told by you and your friend, it became by you all, right? I just used a pronoun to replace words, which we call the antecedent. That's all I'm doing here. Okay, so it gets easier as you go, believe me. Now, to practice all this, again, I always give you a pro tip, use Magistrula, right? So Magistrula, again, I don't own it. I have nothing to do with Magistrula. I'm just a big fan, an admirer. Magistrula will give you sentences with pronouns and it'll spit out as many as you can possibly take to practice all this, because I really think the best way to learn anything in Latin grammar is to do it through the context of actual sentences and stories instead of just memorizing a chart. You can memorize the chart if you want, but I think this is much more efficient and easier to do. And because Magistrula is free, it's easy. You can just have it do as many as you want. Okay, so just set it up to do pronouns and you'll be good to go. So let's just recap everything we did in this video, okay? We did specifically first and second person pronouns. So remember, pronouns replace nouns to avoid repetition. That's what you're doing. The noun being replaced is called the antecedent, the thing that came before, okay? So first person pronouns are I and we, singular and plural. Second person pronouns are you and you all. Okay, so first and second person pronouns, right? These personal pronouns do not have gender. We said that before. I just want to reemphasize that. So if I say to you, I, we, you, or you all, you do not know the gender of the person or object. So there's no gender involved. And that's the reason why we didn't include third person pronouns, right, in this video, because they do have gender and it just makes an added level of difficulty. We'll cover that in another video. Okay, the antecedent tells you the person and the number of your pronouns. So it'll tell you if it's first or second person, and it'll tell you how many there are, singular or plural. The case of the pronoun, though, is based off its own function in its sentence, right? What is that pronoun doing? If it's a subject, nominative, you use a nominative pronoun, right? So you have to figure out what the pronoun is doing in the sentence, what its function is, and that'll help you understand which case to pick. Okay, so it might sound a little bit confusing, but if you practice this, grow through, you might be reading